Right now, Russia is one of the most talked about nations on Earth. Wars, sanctions, alliances shifting, nuclear threats. Russia is on the front page of every newspaper, every week. But here is something almost nobody in those conversations is saying. The Bible may have already written Russia's story, thousands of years before Russia existed as a nation. Not as a vague metaphor, not as a guess, as a specific, named, geographical prophecy sitting in a chapter of Ezekiel that most churches never preach, most Bible studies skip entirely, and most Christians have never once read in their lives. Today we are going to change that. We are going to open Ezekiel 38 together, carefully, word by word, name by name, look at what the ancient text actually says, trace those names through history, and let you decide what you think. Because this chapter is either one of the most remarkable coincidences in all of ancient literature, or it is exactly what it claims to be. Ezekiel was a priest turned prophet who was taken captive to Babylon in the first wave of deportations from Jerusalem around 597 BC. He wrote from exile, and his visions are among the strangest and most vivid in the entire Bible. Most people know Ezekiel for two things: the Valley of Dry Bones in chapter 37, and the strange four-faced creatures with wheels in chapter 1. But chapter 38, the Gog and Magog prophecy, is the chapter that scholars of biblical prophecy keep returning to. It describes a future military coalition attacking Israel from the north, and the nations it names have kept theologians and historians busy for centuries. Son of man, set your face against Gog, of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him. Ezekiel 38, verse 2. Three names: Gog, Magog, Meshech, and Tubal. To a modern reader, they sound like nonsense, but to scholars of ancient geography, they are not nonsense at all. Let's take each name seriously and trace it through ancient sources. Magog. Magog first appears in Genesis 10, the so-called Table of Nations, as a grandson of Noah, one of the ancestors of the post-flood peoples. The historian Josephus, writing in the 1st century AD, identified the descendants of Magog as the Scythians, fierce nomadic peoples who dominated the vast steppes north of the Black Sea and Caspian Sea. That territory corresponds geographically to modern Russia, Ukraine, and the surrounding region. The connection between Magog and the far northern peoples was already established in Jewish tradition before the New Testament was written. Meshech and Tubal. These two names appear together multiple times in Ezekiel, not just in chapter 38, but also in chapters 27 and 32, where they are described as traders from the north dealing in copper, slaves, and iron. Ancient sources, including Herodotus writing in the 5th century BC, place Meshech and Tubal in the region of Asia Minor and the Caucasus, roughly corresponding to modern Turkey and the areas north of it. Some scholars have drawn a connection between Meshech and the ancient name of Moscow, though this remains debated. What's less debated is the direction Ezekiel says the invasion comes from. The direction, the far north. I will turn you around, put hooks in your jaws, and lead you out with all your army from the far north. Ezekiel 38, verse 4 and verse 15. And again, you will come from your place in the far north. Ezekiel 38, verse 15. The Hebrew phrase used here is Yereka Tzafon, the uttermost parts of the north. From the geographical perspective of Jerusalem, if you draw a straight line due north, you pass through the Caucasus region, through Ukraine, and directly into the heart of Russia. Rosh, the most debated term. The Hebrew phrase in verse 2 is Nesi Rosh. Some translations render this as chief prince, treating Rosh as a common adjective meaning head or chief. But many scholars, including the translators of the Greek Septuagint written before the time of Christ, understood Rosh as a proper noun, a place name. Wilhelm Gesenius, one of the most respected Hebrew scholars of the 19th century, argued directly that Rosh refers to a people living in the region of the Volga, the heartland of what would become Russia. The Hebrew word Rosh and the name Rus, from which Russia takes its name, bear a striking resemblance. Scholars debate whether this is meaningful or coincidental. Ezekiel 38 doesn't just name the leader, it names the allies. Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya are with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer and all its troops, the house of Togarmah from the far north and all its troops, many people are with you. Ezekiel 38, verse 5 to 6. Let's run through the modern identifications. Persia. This is the easiest one. Persia is modern Iran. Iran is named explicitly. And Iran's relationship with Russia today, including military cooperation, is not ancient history. It is current events. Ethiopia, in biblical usage, refers to the region south of Egypt, encompassing modern Sudan and possibly northern Ethiopia. A Muslim-majority region, increasingly aligned with anti-Western powers. Libya, to the west of Egypt. A nation that has seen significant Russian military presence in recent years. Gomer, most commonly identified with the ancient Sumerians, who lived in the region of modern Turkey and Eastern Europe. Some scholars connect Gomer to Germany. Togarmah, typically associated with the region of modern Turkey or Armenia in the Caucasus. Ezekiel says it comes from the far north. When you lay this coalition on a modern map, what you see is a configuration of nations that today are increasingly aligned against Western and Israeli interests. Russia, Iran, Turkey, and various North African states. Is that a coincidence? You'll have to decide. The occasion for the invasion is specific. Ezekiel says it happens when Israel has been brought back from the sword and gathered from many nations, dwelling in the land in a state of relative security, a people gathered from the nations. After many days you will be called to arms. In future years you will invade a land that has recovered from war, whose people were gathered from many nations to the mountains of Israel, which had long been desolate. They had been brought out from the nations, and now all of them live in safety. Ezekiel 38, verse 8. This language is striking to anyone aware of modern history. The modern state of Israel was established in 1948, a people gathered back to a land that had been largely desolate. The explicit language of restoration from the nations, the return to the mountains of Israel, for many readers, this sounds less like ancient history and more like a description of the modern world. The stated motive for the invasion is economic: to plunder and loot, to carry off silver and gold, to take away livestock and goods. A resource war. And the coalition's plan fails catastrophically. In my zeal and fiery wrath, I declare that at that time there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel. The fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the beasts of the field, every creature that moves along the ground, and all the people on the face of the earth will tremble at my presence. The mountains will be overturned, the cliffs will crumble, and every wall will fall to the ground. I will summon a sword against Gog on all my mountains, declares the sovereign Lord. Every man's sword will be against his brother. I will execute judgment on him with plague and bloodshed. I will pour down torrents of rain, hailstones, and burning sulfur on him, and on his troops, and on the many. It's a fair question. If Ezekiel 38 is in the Bible, and it obviously is, Why don't most Christians know anything about it? Several reasons. First, the ancient place names require work to decode. Most pastors are not trained in ancient Near Eastern geography, and it's far easier to preach passages that feel immediately accessible. Second, any connection between biblical prophecy and current events invites controversy. When the text seems to name modern nations, the conversation gets political quickly, and many churches prefer to stay out of that territory entirely. Third, there is genuine theological disagreement about whether Ezekiel 38 is future prophecy at all. Some scholars, particularly those in the amillennialist and preterist traditions, interpret the Gog and Magog material as symbolic or as already fulfilled in ancient Scythian incursions. Under that reading, there is nothing to watch for. It's history, not prophecy. But the futurist interpretation that Ezekiel 38 describes a real, still future event is not held only by fringe prophecy enthusiasts. It is defended by serious biblical scholars who point to the specificity of the passage, the language of Israel's restoration, and the scale of the described conflict, which fits no known ancient event. The debate is ongoing. Serious Christians land on different sides. What cannot be denied is that the text is remarkable, specific, geographically grounded, and describing a coalition in a scenario that, 2.5 millennia after it was written, reads as disturbingly contemporary. Here is what we know with certainty. Ezekiel wrote about a massive future invasion from the far north, led by a figure called Gog from the land of Magog, supported by a coalition that includes Persia, Libya, Ethiopia, and nations from the Caucasus region. He set this against the backdrop of a restored Israel. He wrote all of it somewhere around 570 BC. Whether you read it as literal future prophecy, as symbolic warning, or as already fulfilled history, the specificity is extraordinary. The Bible is full of passages like this, chapters that seem obscure, ancient, and distant, until the moment history begins to catch up with them, at which point they stop feeling distant at all. If this kind of careful, honest engagement with what the Bible actually says, not what you were told it says, not what is convenient, but what it actually says, is the kind of content you want more of, then subscribe to Bible Radar. Every week we open chapters that most people walk right past. And if you want to go deeper into the prophetic books, our video on Daniel chapter 7 covers the 4 world empires Daniel saw in vision, including the one that many scholars believe corresponds to Rome centuries before they existed. That one is worth your time. God bless.